Okay, so nothing too complicated there. Now let's look at what happens when we edit a record. Now again, the link is going to look like this. We're going back to the path where we were. In the case of our products.php file, that will be admin/products.php. The action will be edit form, and our ID will be the unique identifier for this item. Now if we go back to our products page again real quick, you'll see that we run the same code here regardless of what our action is. We're routing everything through our data administration page function and passing it these options. So when we click that edit link, this page will render again, and we'll pass these options one more time to this function. I'm going to go back to CRUD.php and scroll down to the very bottom where this function exists, data administration page. Again, we pull in our path as one of the options. We establish our content variable, and now we switch based on action. This time, edit form is our action, so we're going to process this code here, data add edit form. And just like we did before in our CRUD scripts, we're getting the unique identifier from the URL if it exists. If it doesn't, we're going to pass an empty string. We're just using a ternary operator here. And then we're passing this our options. So let's go ahead and roll up to data add edit form. Okay, again, we're passing two parameters here, the unique identifier for this record and our set of options. Now the first thing we're doing here is building a unique identifier for our form. If we look at where this is used in our script, you see it right here where we check to make sure that the post ID equals this ID. So what we're doing here is adding a little bit of a security to make sure that when we're posting from this form that we're actually getting this form. And then we also pass that form ID as a hidden input in our form so we can run this validation when the form gets submitted. So this next line here, we're checking to make sure that the form ID has been passed, and we're checking to make sure that the form ID matches what is in our options basically. The unique part of this form ID is this table option right here. So if both of these pass, then we're going to set our values array to the post array. Now if this didn't pass, what this means is that this form is being loaded for the first time. Here, the form has been submitted and it's being loaded into values because maybe it didn't pass validation and we want to rebuild that same form. In this case though, we're building the form from scratch. So we need to pull the data from the database. So we're using MySQL query, we're selecting all from, then we're passing the name of the table, where, and then we're passing the name of the unique identifier column, and then we're passing it the ID. And we're running it through MySQL real escape string, just to make sure that our data has been sanitized. Once we have this result object, we'll go ahead and use MySQL fetch array in order to pull that record into an array, and we'll assign it to the values variable. Now again, just like in our previous CRUD script, if this is an add form, we want to set these values for each one of the columns that we're going to be modifying to an empty string. So that's what we do here. We set the value of the ID column to empty, and then we loop through each one of the add edit columns, pulling out the name of the column here, and we set the values for that particular column to an empty string. Again, if we go back to our products.php file, we can see the structure of our add edit columns here. We have an array that includes as the key the name of the column, and then some data to associate with that column. So the title and a list of validation that we're going to use. In the case of price, we also have a prefix attribute too. So I'm going to go back to our CRUD.php file. So at this point, remember we're editing a record. We have our list of values here for that record in the values array. Next, what we do is establish the text of certain items in our form based on whether this is an add or edit form. So we're setting these defaults to the submit text being add item. Now this is what's going to display in the submit button. Our action, which is add item, and our title, which will display as a title tag above our form, which is add, and then the name of the item that we're going to add. If this is an edit form, our ID, which we would have passed through here, will not be empty, and so we'll change all of these three items to say edit instead of add. Now again, all of this should be pretty familiar to you already. We're just modifying a couple of places where we need to slip in our specific text or reference particular fields. Okay, now I'm going to scroll down. Now what we're doing is building the form inputs dynamically based on our list of add edit columns. So we're going to begin with an empty form input string, and then we're going to loop through each, pulling out the column name and the options for the column. Again, the column name was the key, the options was the value in our add edit columns item inside of our options array. And as we loop through each one of these, we're going to render a paragraph. We're going to begin with the title, which is in our column options here. If there's a prefix set, we're going to display this. Again, this is just going to display for our price column. We'll add the input, which at this point is always going to be a text input. We're going to give it the name of the column name. Again, this is what we pulled out right here, which was the key. And then we're going to pull the value from the values array, and we're going to pass it the column name as the key. So if we go back to our products.php file, we're displaying the title, the price, and the image fields. I'll go back to CRUD.php. So the first time we loop through here, we'll have a single paragraph for the title. The next time we loop through, we'll have the price, and then we'll have the image. And finally, we're going to build the form and the page. We'll create our heading 1 tag. We'll begin our form with an opening form tag. Again, we're using the path, which we added to the options array near the beginning of this script. We add our form inputs here, which includes the 3 inputs that we built right here. And then we add our submit button. Below this, we have 3 hidden inputs. One is our form ID. Again, this is what we check above to see if this is a resubmission of an existing form. And then we have our action, which we established up here. And then we have our ID, which again is the unique identifier for this particular record, and it's what we passed through the function up here as a parameter.